Dr. Michael Mash, Barbell Rehab. Thanks for coming on Move It Fix podcast.
Thanks for having me on, Dr. DeBell. Excited to talk about and see what we are going to get into today.
Yeah, me too. I wanted, you're obviously Barbell Rehab is what you are focusing on, and the way that you teach and instruct and where you spend your creative energies. So I want to talk to you about barbell lifts, and I'm curious about talking about programming, generally speaking. Like, I have the majority of my background, for example, in I read Arnold Schwarzenegger's Modern Encyclopedia to Bodybuilding, and I did that, and then I did CrossFit, and then I've done some other stuff. But I'm curious, from your perspective, how do you think about programming the barbell lifts into somebody's program who has the goal of training longevity, health, being strong, not necessarily competing, because those I think would be quite different.
Absolutely. But yeah,
can you talk about how you go about in your head?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I think you already touched on the big point is what's the client's goal, because programming for performance and setting a 1 rep max new personal record on the platform is going to be a lot different than programming for, I want to feel good and I want to be strong and I want to have as much lean body weight and muscle mass as I can to promote health and longevity. So, and that's the majority of the people I work with. The majority of the people I work with, the majority of the people that reach out to me are looking for general health and general strength, not performance. So I think the issue comes down to when people that want to train for general health adopt high-level bodybuilding or high-level powerlifting programs as their own. And this can run into issues. So for example, the way I like to program the barbell lifts, if you came to me and you said, hey, I'm looking to get on a general strength program, I'm interested in learning the barbell lifts. I have people, I typically program them in the beginning of the workout, whether it's a 4-time-a-week workout where we'll do an upper-lower split, so 2 upper days, 2 lower days, or whether it's a 3-time-a-week workout, which would be 3 full body days. I always start them with a big basic barbell lift, some form of a squat, some form of a deadlift, bench press, and overhead press. And what's key is, since it's the first lift, I like to keep the rep range somewhere in that 4 to 8 rep range. And this lower rep range gets some sort of bad rap because it's like, oh, you're a beginner, you shouldn't start with low reps. But the key here is the intensity. People, and we can get into a whole debate on what matters more, form or programming, but what ends up happening is people will dose the intensity too high in the beginning stages, right? So they'll see 3 sets of 5 or 3 sets of 6, and they'll instantly think they need to take it to failure each and every set. And that's what can run into issues, where people take things to failure too quickly and then they blame poor form, right? When it really comes down to is maybe we need to adjust the intensity here versus digging into the form.
So the kind of the argument there that people have, or I guess where the question is okay, if you did, it's okay, somebody says we don't want people who are newer to the lifts to lift heavy because they might get hurt because they don't have the form at that heavy of load. And because they're doing 3 to 8 reps, it's going to be heavier. And you're saying maybe we start those people with 3 to, I don't know if you said 3 to 6 or 3 to 8.
Yeah.
I can't remember.
4 to 8. Yeah. Somewhere in that. Yep.
I don't know if you said 3 to 6 or 3 to 8, 4 to 8.
I might have said both.
but what you're saying is use those rep ranges, but just don't push those like you're trying to lift the heaviest 4 reps or the heaviest 8 reps as possible.
Exactly. Yeah. So we keep the rep range lower, but we do it sub-maximally. And that's where we use RPE, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we might start people on a set 3 sets of 5, 3 sets of 6, but we might start them at an RPE 6. So they're leaving 4 reps in the tank. So this is a great way to practice the movement without building a bunch of fatigue, but also allowing more room to progress intensity linearly in the beginning phases.
So that's why you would do that instead of doing, 3 sets of 12 to 7 out of 10 RPE.
Exactly. Yeah. For a new person, for somebody that's new to training, I'm not going to have them do a barbell squat 3 sets of 12 because they don't have the technical proficiency yet. So they're going to look like Bambi for 12 straight reps, right? So they're going to be all over the place and they're going to build up too much fatigue. I'd rather get in, get out, get the lift, have the technical proficiency and leaving some pounds on the platform, because the next time they go in, they're going to add 5 or 10 pounds to the bar.
So they can focus on each individual rep better because there are a lower total number of reps, but the intensity at the level so they can do it. And it's challenging, but it's not, pushing them to the limit, especially in the earlier phases.
Exactly. Yeah. Because we can get to pushing to the limits of fatigability later when we add in our lunge work or we add in our like hip thrust work. These exercises that don't require as much technical proficiency where people will feel, oh man, I got a good, and people always want a muscle burn, right? I got a good muscle burn from those split squats, right? Versus, oh man, the last 3 reps of my squats, I only felt them in my lumbar spine. So that's where you get the best of both worlds. So in the beginning, you program these big barbell lifts at lower intensity, but then you can take the intensity up a bit on the accessory movements.
And so the reason to start with the big lifts is that you're trying to hit the most like compound coordinated pattern versus something like a split squat, which is, obviously it can't be as heavy. It can't be quite as full body. Is that why you start with the big lift first?
Yeah, I think it's twofold. One's going to be mentally. You're coming in mentally fresh. So we're assuming we're not just jumping in and doing the lift. We're assuming that there's some sort of dynamic warm-up. Everybody's warm-up is going to be different. That would be a whole different podcast. But we're assuming that they've got an effective dynamic warm-up. Now they are fresh. It's like getting the most important stuff of your day done first thing in the morning, right? You wake up and you're fresh and you're like, let's get at it. So that's how it comes, rather than, okay, now my legs feel like jello from split squats. It's time to barbell squat. So maybe that would work better for more advanced bodybuilding. Like if the goal is to accumulate fatigue, but that's where I talked about in the beginning, where people take these advanced bodybuilding and powerlifting programs and think that that's the best way to train for general strength and health.
How much do you think about during these lifts, right? Because one of the things with doing like a back squat or a barbell overhead press is, their full range of motion in certain joints. How much do you sort of like think about pushing the very end range of motion of a joint with a lot of load versus trying to like stop before you load the very, very end range? So for example,
Gotcha.
what I mean by that is somebody is doing back squats, which like arguably the human body, like you should basically round your lumbar spine to rotate your pelvis to change like where the hip socket is. So you don't get to the maximal hip flexion where it could be in certain people impinged or stopped by the structure of the joint. Versus, right. And so because we're putting a lot of weight on the back, we might need to hold the spine stable, which then kind of like potentially makes the hip joint get to its anatomical limitation. How much do you think about that in the training aspect, like that range of motion? Like, are you thinking about trying to get maximal range of motion under the loads, or are you kind of putting a little barrier buffer when you're working with people, or does it depend on the person?
Gotcha. I think it depends on the person, the person's goals, and the person's past medical history. So a lot of the people that I work with, and I always keep a roster of a couple people online one-on-one. They've come to me because they've had some sort of injury before. So they want to continue to strength train, but they want to limit any kind of flare-ups or re-injury. So let's first talk about the powerlifter. If the powerlifter comes to me and wants to train, they have to squat to depth, right? This arbitrary standard of greater trochanter needs to come below the top of the patella, because if they don't, they're going to get red lighted at their competition. So those people, hell or high water, need to find a way to squat to depth, or they're unable to do their sport. On the other hand, if somebody comes to me, they're like, I have no I have no plans on competing in a powerlifting competition, but I want to squat, and I want to squat heavy because I enjoy it and I want to squat. I like to modulate the stance width and degree of toe out to allow them to get as much comfortable range as possible. And I don't think this is inherently dangerous, because if I tie this back into what I said initially, we're not loading these people up heavy in the beginning. So the body is extremely capable of adapting. So I think if you take somebody untrained and you have them do max effort work with full range of motion, you might be asking for a problem. But if you take somebody untrained, you have them comfortably and tolerably load through what they're capable of with an appropriate intensity, then the body will adapt appropriately.
Yeah, isn't it like there's so much dogma around barbell squatting?
Yeah, for sure.
Right. And something that you noted is if you're obviously if you're competing in powerlifting, there's a certain depth that is required for the sport. Just like in basketball, the hoop is 10 feet high, right? Like that's just a physical sort of reality of the sport, which I think has to be separated. And maybe there's probably a lot of people that would argue that you wouldn't separate what you need for a sport versus what's the best for health and longevity and strength, right? Now,
I was one of those people 5 years ago. I would have told you everybody needs to squat to depth because that's just the way it's supposed to be. And my thoughts have definitely evolved over the last 5 years.
And like, how have they evolved, and why? Like, what led them to evolve?
It led them, I mean, just more reading, more just growth as a human, just realizing that everybody's built differently, that wow. And when there's two polar ends of the spectrum, the answer is usually somewhere in the middle. So we got one side saying that everybody should and has to squat to depth, or you're like not a human. And the other side says, hey, we're not putting any load on this person until the form looks perfect, right? So we got these two polar opposites. And when I talk about this in my workshops, and anybody that knows me, they know I like to shoot the gap. The answer is somewhere usually in the middle. What were we talking about? You just asked me what led to my changes in my belief. Oh,
yeah. And what are
basically when I started working with people, and you just realize that some people, no matter how much you manipulate stance width, degree of toe out, some people are going to squat high. And does that mean just because they are not squatting 3 inches deeper that they have no muscle activation, or that they're the exercise totally useless? Like, oh, you're high on your depth. Nothing's working unless we get you 3 inches lower. Like, if you just like logically think about that, it doesn't make much sense.
Like, then if you break 90, magically the exercise has all these benefits that you didn't otherwise have.
Yeah. Like, come on.
Like, I mean, why do you think that exists? Do you think that's just a remnant of teaching, and now like more people are starting to question that? Or maybe just the fact that more people can share their ideas on the internet, it leads to certain, I think about it like this. Can you imagine if you saw a bunch of like other animals in nature doing an exercise in a way where like you could look at the physical structure of that animal and be like, well, all you deer out there are like stressing your deer hips by like doing this exercise in this particular way. Maybe that's not the best thing. Maybe there's other ways to do it that are better. I'm like, what are you even trying to accomplish over here?
I think because we as humans like to fit, we are scared at the fact that we're complex. So we like to simplify things to ease our brains. So it's easy just to say, this is the way you should squat and you need to do it this way, right? Rather than, wait, let's actually use our noggins and think about this.
Right. And so it comes to the point of like, what is the point of training the squat in a particular way?
Yeah. And it really comes down to the client's goals, right? Is the client trying to lift as much weight as possible for one rep? If that's your goal, that's your goal. I'm cool with that. I'll help you do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
That person's going to need to be coached differently than the 70-year-old grandmother who wants to be able to stand up out of a chair with more ease. We're going to squat both of these people because I truly believe, this is my bias, I will fully admit that, I truly believe that the squat is a is a foundational movement pattern that we do all the time, standing up out of a chair, standing up off the commode. So I want to make people more resilient in it, but it's the way we do it and the way we apply the stress is going to be different from person to person.
So what do you think about lumbar flexion in a loaded back squat?
Good question.
For the person who, because maybe it's necessary for a certain type of individual to get below 90 in terms of like based on the structure of their joint and the length of their levers. But what about, let's say, for the person who wants to train keeping their joints as healthy as possible, gaining muscle mass, coordination, etc. Do you think that they should be like stopping before they get lumbar flexion, or do you think that there should be some that you're okay with for that particular person?
Gotcha. I think we need to differentiate lumbar flexion from end range lumbar flexion, because when it comes down to this, if you look at some of Stu McGill's older work, even to the coach's eye. So if I have you do a body weight squat, into my eye, it looks like neutral lumbar spine. Like I'm 100% positive he's good. That's neutral spine. It's been shown that there's actually up to 20, 25 degrees of lumbar flexion anyways. So isn't that wild? So like even to the naked coach's eye, there's inherently going to be some degree of lumbar flexion. So it's almost unavoidable.
I really want to see a video of that to see if I think that it looks like there's none.
So it's where I've actually,
right?
you had Greg Lehman on the podcast, right?
He's been on several times. Yeah.
He actually did it to me. I've had it done on myself.
Oh, so like firsthand experience here.
Yeah. So I was like, I got this. Like I don't round, everything's fine. And I think it came out to be 22 degrees. So that's N of 1, obviously. But I don't think there's anything inherently evil with it. But I think training somebody new to end range lumbar flexion, if they're not priorly adapted to it, that's where we can get into trouble. So if I'm coaching somebody, I like to see neutral to my coach's eye, because I know that, okay, yes, they're going into lumbar flexion, but it's not end range. It's not, it's in, what am I trying to say? It's not end range, and we're not taking the joints to somewhere with a load that they're not ready to tolerate yet. So that's where it's unavoidable. But even if the goal, take a front squat, for example. So take some like high level Olympic athletes, right? Front squats and overhead squats. They're going the whole way down to their butts, like almost a couple inches off the ground. So they're going full butt wink, whatever they got. And if we look at that, the injury rates are actually pretty low because they've built up a tolerance to it over time. That doesn't mean that you should do it right away as if your goal is general strength, but I think we need to be careful in just saying lumbar flexion's bad.
I think so too. That's an area that I have evolved on as well. It's interesting, right? Like if you look at the lumbar spine structure, the most range of motion it has is into flexion.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's like, how's that a coincidence?
Right. Like I call it anatomical, what's the term? Anatomical interpretation, right? Like we can look at the anatomy, interpret like how everything should sort of move together, right? Like if you look at the scapula and the shoulder socket, like if you're lifting overhead, you're trying to position the socket of the shoulder to not end range, like pinch at the shoulder, right?
Correct. Everything needs to move optimally so that does not happen.
It's like the joints need to have a little bit of give so that you can like push that through the system, so you don't have one particular joint that's being so heldly firm against the other bone at the very end range. And I feel like with a little bit of lumbar flexion, if it's controlled, it's like enough of a give to not like firmly jam the end range of the joint under a maximal load, because it sinks in through the degrees of motion at the other segments, right?
And that's trainable, right? And that's trainable as long as we apply the stimulus systematically and we're not taking people to failure too quickly.
And the hard question I think with that is, should you be trying to systematically load in that way, right? And I think this is where there's another fork in the road, right? Yeah. Is it worth it for me to try to systematically load that? or to just moderate the depth of my squat to the lowest I feel like I can really prevent and control the motion in my spine.
Gotcha.
And then do spinal motion exercises when I'm not compressing my spine with weight directly, like at high loads.
Gotcha. Yeah. I mean, at this point in my career right now, I might have a different opinion in 5 years when I go back and listen to this. Hopefully I listen to it. But I
Better
still
reminder.
coach the squat to neutral spine,
Okay.
to coach's eye. But there is going to be a subset of clients where they need to be resilient in lumbar flexion. And a couple that come to mind are going to be construction workers and nurses that routinely move and transfer patients. These people that have to lift loads in awkward positions. Like when you transfer a patient, it's not, the patient's not a barbell, right? You can't
Perfectly
bring this.
symmetrical.
Yeah. And it's inevitable that in order to do that, you're going to have to get into some visible lumbar flexion. You can get into a hip hinge, you can do as much as you possibly can, but things happen when we're moving humans, and things happen when we're moving large, bulky objects, that for this subset of people, I actually might train them to be resilient in a little bit more lumbar flexion. I'm not going to train them to end range on day one, but if I see a visible butt wink, or if I see that, oh, we're allowing that pelvis to posteriorly tilt at the bottom of the squat, I might be okay with that for that subset of people.
I guess the question I would have is like, how do you, the question is always like, what's the right dose? I mean, isn't really every like strength training question or movement related question about what is the dose and what is the way that you're doing it and what is the recovery?
Yeah.
So like looking at those things, it's like, what is the dose when everybody's different and everybody has different lever lengths? So the loads are and the torques at every joint is going to be different. And there's different structures and shapes of lumbar spine and hips. Like, how do we even know that what like dose we're applying? And that's a hard question.
Yeah. And I don't think that there's a perfect answer, but I think that within the last 5 to 10 years, using RPE, or rate of perceived exertion, for those of you that are listening that don't know that, that is that's if you're training and you complete a lift and then you subjectively rate how difficult that lift was after, on a scale of 1 to 10. 10 out of 10 being that was the hardest thing I've ever done. I couldn't do another rep if I tried. And then 9 out of 10 means I could have done one more. 8 out of 10 means I could have done two more. And I think this fallacy comes that, and if we look, you mentioned Arnold Schwarzenegger, I think, back in the beginning of this podcast.
Yeah, the modern encyclopedia of bodybuilding.
And I think this idea comes from back in the 70s and 80s, where all of the progress happens in those last 1 to 2 reps, right?
Yeah, I actually deep down, I do still think that.
Yeah, but it's not true, right?
Now that you say it, are you sure it's not true?
Yeah. So when I'm working on strength, when I'm working on programming these big basic barbell exercises for folks, I don't like to see the RPE go over 8.5 too frequently. In the beginning, we're starting people at 5-6, right? We're allowing people to get accustomed to the movement. But when people are incrementally loading and they're starting to get to higher intensities on the squat, bench, dead, and press, I'm capping that RPE. I want to see the average RPE of the set at 8.5. If you start throwing too many 9s at me, that means I need to reprogram you to bring that RPE back down a tad.
Oh, how do you do that?
You can, by manipulation of sets and reps. So for example, if somebody is doing 3 sets of 6 with 225 on the squat, and it comes out to an average RPE of 9.5. To me, that's like a red light. Okay, this intensity is too much. We're training near to failure. What you can do is you can decrease the reps a little bit and maybe add a set. So instead of doing 3 sets of 6 at 225, you change it to 4 sets of 5 at 225. If you multiply that out, 3 times 6 equals 18, 4 times 5 equals 20. So we're almost at equivalent volumes, right? Mm-hmm. If we're using volume as defined as sets times reps. But now, since we're using the same weight at a 4x5 scheme, that's going to drop the relative intensity of the RPE back down to maybe 7, 7, 5, or 8. So it's a way you can manipulate sets and reps to keep the RPE where you want it.
And is that keeping the weight constant or just manipulating it that way naturally kind of does that in your experience?
You can you can sort of flip flop the reps and the sets and reps in the beginning to bring down the RPE. And then you can also add a little bit of weight after that, like maybe in the next session, and see how much you can add weight with the new rep scheme at 4x5 until you run into the same issue. Okay, now we're on 4x5 at 245, and now we're starting to hit sets. Now we're starting to hit RPE 995 again. So it's just this continuous juggling game of how can I consistently manipulate sets, reps, frequency, overall volume, overall tonnage to make sure that somebody's still progressing while keeping the RPE at 8.5.
So when you're programming, like people are rating each set and then sending you that information?
Yeah, at least for the barbell lifts. Like I may program somebody, I want you to do, and you can, RPE can either be prescriptive or, I missed the word.
Like feedback?
Yeah. So you can either prescribe the RPE. You can either tell somebody, I want you to do 3 sets of 6 at RPE 8, or you can tell somebody, I want you to do 3 sets of 6 at 225 pounds, and then tell me what the RPE is after. For beginners, it's best to be feedback with the RPE, because RPE is a learning scale, right? Beginners are going to think everything's difficult. They're going to do a set and they're going to be like, that was the hardest thing I've ever done. It was an RPE 10. But then you look at the speed of the last rep and you're like, no, it's not. You had at least 4 more.
So that's why you tell them the weight and you get them to tell you the RPE so you can figure out what they think is actually hard based on how it looks with the velocity of the bar speed. Or the velocity of the bar speed, is that the bar velocity?
Yeah. So we do it feedback wise for a little bit until they gain and understand, until I as the coach and them as the client, we make a mutual decision. Hey, yeah, your RPE rating is pretty on, like you're doing well now. So now let's switch to, okay, I want you to try, maybe for the next block, I want you to try 4 sets of 5 squat at RPE 8. So then you can turn it into more prescriptive based once somebody understands RPE.
And then they get to basically work up in weight to try to get to that RPE on their last couple working sets, or?
Yeah, or either the top set, maybe the top set's an 8, the second set's an 8.5, the third set's a 9, and then they auto regulate and drop 15 pounds to do the last set to keep it back where I want it.
Got it. Oh, that's so interesting. I've never thought about doing it in terms of the feedback and then manipulating the the sets and reps in that feedback. I've always used it prescriptively.
Yeah, and I still do that too, but I think that that's our best bet we have right now. As far as your question is, how do we dose, right?
Right, because we know that like overdosing volume is predictive in for injuries, right? Like a lot of
for sure. I mean, that's like straight out of Tim Gabbett's work. We know that for sure. Like we know that too much, too fast, too soon is going to be a increased risk for injury. So.
Got it. I can hear people saying, well, but the outer layers of the lamina of the disc do not have nociceptors. So therefore we cannot get appropriate feedback on the delamination that leads to potential disc bulges and herniations. I think that's that's an interesting argument, right? What do you?
I mean, we can go down that rabbit hole if you want, because we know that 50% of people in their 40s have disc bulges and have no back pain. So even if what you're saying is correct, that let's hypothesize that squatting causes disc bulges. So make sure you don't, like, when you go to edit this podcast, make sure you don't like cut that one sentence out that
this is untouched. This is raw. I'm not touching.
Where you go and post and be like, Barbell Rehab said that squatting causes disc bulges, but like, let's just hypothesize that it actually does.
Okay.
Is that a big deal? If we put 150-year-olds in a room with no back pain and 50% of them show disc bulge, are disc bulges necessarily a bad thing? Or they can be, but are they as bad as we think they are?
Well, mean, clearly there's people who have them and don't have problems, right? They don't
Yeah.
have any symptoms, which is it's so crazy. It's so weird that there can be tissue damage like that in
Hmm.
such a, a part of your body that's right next to your spinal cord, and people can have
Hmm.
no symptoms.
Yep. I mean, once we start to talk about herniations versus bulges, the incidence rate of asymptomatic herniations is a little bit lower. So
Mm-hmm.
I think I said 50% of people in their 40s who have no back pain will show a disc bulge in MRI. I think that is down to 1 in 3, or about 30% for herniations. So herniations are more correlated with radicular signs and symptoms. But again, 1 in 3 will not show any signs.
Yeah, that leads to so much misinformation. People go to their doctor, right? Their medical doctor or orthopedist, and they get an MRI and they see a disc bulge and they have some back pain, and they get scared to continue lifting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But what's worse? not
Exactly. And
not not lifting and then not getting, bone density, neural output, precise, continually working on the precision and the neuromuscular control of your joints, or trying to avoid this,
yeah, and
disc bulge. Mm-hmm.
I think you bring up an interesting point of what is the lesser of two evils. Would you rather have somebody train their entire life and have a couple nagging injuries here and there, maybe a back tweak a couple times a year, maybe a shoulder tweak, even under the best programming? We know people are going to tweak stuff. It's part of being human. So would you rather have that, people tweaking things every now and then, but when they get into their later years, they're functional, they have significant reduced risk of cardiovascular issues, significantly reduced risk of sarcopenia? Standing up out of a chair for them is not a 1 rep max squat? Or would you rather have somebody completely not lift at all because of the potential of tweaking things orthopedically, but now you're significantly increasing the risk of bigger, badder things that could happen later in life, right? So it's
Yeah,
just weighing, like, we got to weigh the pros and cons here.
I think that in my own personal experience and experience, working with a lot of people, it is pretty amazing how much stuff conservatively you can, like, with the right amount of rest and avoiding certain aggravating movements and
Yeah.
building certain kind of strength. It is quite amazing how much stuff can get almost 100% functional if you have the right time scope.
Yeah. People's time scopes are way too small, right? Nobody wants to look big picture.
Yeah, I mean, what kind of like I've had I've personally had some things that I was like, I think I'm gonna have to get surgery. Like, I think something's so messed up that I need surgical
Oh yeah.
repair. And then 8 months later, sometimes a year later, of really patient and very, like, particular things, it's like, I cannot believe my body feels this good when it felt like I needed that. I mean, have you had those types of
Oh
things?
yeah.
I mean, obviously you've worked with people, right? Because those are the people who come to get care,
Yeah.
right? A lot of times. But it's different when it's you, right? Like,
Yeah. So
obviously.
I think it's interesting that you just said 8 months to a year, because if we look at the research, we know that tendinopathy conservatively takes about 8 to 12 months to completely get over symptoms. But what do people do? They, Joe Schmo in his 60s decides to hang Christmas lights for a whole day with his arms up overhead for an entire 5 hours straight. And then suddenly he can't raise his arm the next day. He goes into the orthopedic surgeon. He sends him to physical therapy. Guess what? 3 times a week for 4 weeks, and he still has shoulder pain. So what happens? He gets an MRI. It shows a rotator cuff tear that's probably been there for the last 5-10 years. And he goes under the knife in month 3, when we know that conservatively, this takes 8 to 12 months sometimes to get over. So yeah, that's a pet peeve.
That's actually, I painted the ceiling of my garage And it was like the day after I did this CrossFit open workout where I had all these overhead walking lunges. And the next day I woke up and I tried to raise my arm overhead and I was like, what did I do? And
Yeah. It's scary.
I was like, I definitely tore my rotator cuff, right? That was like
Yeah.
the first thing I thought. But then a year later, it's like, I can do everything and it's crazy.
I'd say you asked me a personal experience. Yeah, when I was 18, I had sciatica down my left leg for 9 months after tweaking it on a one rep mat.
When
Huh?
you're 18?
Yeah, because that's when it
Whoa.
was like grip and rip, baby. It was like, how much can I go into the gym and lift? And then you get that. I worked up to 455 that day on the deadlift. About halfway up, I felt a snap, jolt down my left leg. And next thing you know, for the next 9 months, every time I took a step, every time I moved my left leg forward
Oh yeah.
and extended my left knee,
Got that nerve tension.
straight down that left leg every time. And then like eventually it just went away. I bet if I had an MRI right now, I'd show multiple herniations. I'm completely asymptomatic in my back. My back feels 100% great, no issues. But I bet there's some stuff in there. But I don't think about it because I don't have any symptoms and I have better programming now.
Yeah, one rep max. I mean, do you one rep max now yourself often or?
I haven't in a while. I'm starting to get to itch the want to again though, and I might, but I can do it a lot more conservatively now. Like I won't just, for example, I took 2 months off of squatting with COVID and all kind of business changes and just not being able to get to the gym. So it led me to be a little bit detrained. Old me would have done maybe like 1 or 2 workouts, and then a workout 3 would be like, all right, I'm back in the swing of things. Let's one rep max. Now I actually started squatting again, 3 sets of 5, and I started 2 weeks ago. And the first time I did it was 3 sets of 5 with 245 on the bar, which was like an RPE 5 for me. But that was my starting point. So I've just been incrementally working up, adding intensity a little bit. Like for tomorrow, I have planned 315, 3 sets of 5, which will be around an RPE 7.5 for me.
Wow. So you really look at the math with your programming.
Yeah, because I think it matters. Maybe it doesn't, but it matters to me.
I think I think the way you do something and the amount that you're doing, which is basically form and the math, like those are, you have to know what those look like with people.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that there's so many times that programming errors are mistaken as form errors. Let me give you a prime example.
Yeah.
Let me give you a prime example.
Yeah,
Let's say that somebody has knee pain during squats, okay? And everybody may be jumped to, let me see your form. Let me see your form. How's your form? And we see, oh, you let your knees come a little bit too far forward during the squat. That's why you have knee pain. I'm going to say, let me see your programming. And if I see your programming and I see the last month that every squat session you take your sets to failure, this isn't a form issue. This is a dosage issue. So I think a lot of form issues are actually hidden programming issues.
I could not agree more. You have to look at both. Like if you just watch everybody looks for the thing that somebody's doing wrong in the way that they're doing the lift.
Mm-hmm.
Without taking a step back and be like, but how much are you doing of everything?
Yeah, don't get me wrong. Form absolutely matters. I don't want people to, it's a sliding scale here. It's not, because again, now we look at the fitness industry, 2 polar opposites. I just touched on this. One side is things need to look pristine before I add any load. The other side will say, hey, the human body is super duper complex. You can lift any way you want as long as the programming's on. And I think the answer is somewhere in the middle there.
Yeah, we love, like you said, humans love, it has to be this or it has to be this. Yeah. Because the ambiguity of the middle, we don't like dealing with the fact that there may not be that there is not a firm answer.
Yeah, that's like 5 years ago, I would have told everybody that you need to back squat, conventional deadlift, and bench press. I don't care who you are. Everybody should do those 3 exercises because that's the way it is now. And you heard it here first live from Barbell Rehab. If you don't feel like back squatting, you're an okay human. That's okay. I think everybody should strength train, Everybody needs to strength train because we live in societies where we just aren't moving enough. Sarcopenia is a major issue for older adults where they're becoming, for those that don't know what sarcopenia is, it's muscle loss that's associated with aging. So we need, and this can lead to falls, fractures, inability to just interact with our world as older adults. So everybody needs to be strength training, but the way you do it, it can be totally individualized. And if it doesn't include a barbell back squat, I'm okay with that.
I don't have a barbell for COVID either.
Well, then you're less of a human than me. I know.
I just heard that you said I'm still okay as a human, so I'm going to take that. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, so to get back to take a step back and sort of zoom out, you're thinking that you're doing either 3 days a week or 4 days a week of strength training, if I'm summarizing correctly.
Me personally, or me programming for somebody else?
You programming for the person who wants to use strength training and particularly barbell lifts with the goal of longevity, strength, not losing muscle mass as they get older, trying to keep more lean muscle for the longevity and health, keeping their joints healthy, etc. You're thinking 3 or 4 days a week?
Yeah, I think that if the goal is just general health, 3 will suffice. I mean, if we look at the recommendations, it's I think I can't remember the organization, but it's 2 times a week strength training and 150 minutes a week of aerobic work, of moderate aerobic work, or 75 minutes a week of vigorous aerobic work. So I think bare minimum, everybody should be strength training 2 times a week. I like to program 3 times a week for Gen Pop just to get that extra day in. And if somebody reaches out because they really want to strength train, then we'll do the upper lower split 4 days a week.
So what does that upper lower split look like? Let's say let's say you want to get after it. You want to go 4 days a week. You think that the recommendations from organizations are too low, like how they put dairy and grains and carbohydrates on the bottom of the food pyramid.
Yeah.
So let's say I want to do 4 days a week. What does that split look like in terms of, are you doing it? Yeah, go ahead.
Gotcha. Yeah. I think in the beginning phases, if somebody is untrained, I would actually have them squat. So we take 2 lower days where you're going to do all lower body, and 2 upper days we're going to do all upper body. So on those lower days, just like we mentioned in the beginning, because we're having people squat in that 4 to 8 rep range and we're not taking them to failure, I'll actually program the squat on both days. It gives them more practice. Think if you want to get good at kicking a soccer ball, would you kick a soccer ball once a week?
I would kick it once a week to failure.
Yeah, exactly. Would you kick it once a week to failure, or would you kick it probably up every day sub-maximally? So I would program the squat both lower body days in the beginning.
When the RPE is low.
When the RPE is low. Yeah, exactly. So then
increased frequency, lower RPE, so that the total aggregate doesn't exceed.
And people get more time to practice it too, right? If you only did it once a week and you're a newbie, you might forget how to squat by day 7. So I keep I feel like I just did this 7 days ago, but yeah, you got to practice it. So my programs look pretty simple in the beginning, where I'm having people squat both times. I'm having people usually deadlift both times as well. And they're also, if that's the goal, some sort of hip hinge variation that works for them, right? We're not conventional deadlifting everybody. We're not sumo deadlifting everybody. Maybe day 1's a trap bar deadlift. Maybe day 3 is a dumbbell RDL. So we're doing some sort of squat pattern, some sort of hinge pattern, some sort of lunge pattern. This is for the lower body days. And then the finish would either be some sort of loaded carry, maybe a hip thrust variation. But I think that people take programs from professional bodybuilders and think that's the way they need to train, right? If the goal is just, if your goal is just to be strong and be able to interact with your world as you age, your lower body days don't need to be more than 4 or 5 exercises strength wise. You don't need to do 10 exercises.
It's like, I mean, it literally is like the 80-20 rule with everything.
Yeah.
Like if you do the basics well, you're going to get pretty far. And then if you want to be competitive, you have to start to really tweak things around to get the most out of your system, right? But
Exactly. And a lot of people don't even become competitive. So, and a lot of people try to become competitive before they even get good at the basics.
that's a problem.
Yeah.
Should be good at the basics before you try to really push the limit there. So you're doing on those lower body days, you're doing some sort of squat variation, some sort of deadlift variation, some sort of hinge variation, but not necessarily the same variation on both days.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, the squat, I may have somebody do, if somebody's goal is to get good at squatting, I may do the same squat variation twice a week, which is fine. Like if it's a high bar, if it's a low bar, if it's a front squat, I might have them do that multiple times on both lower body days because the stimulus is low enough that they'll be able to adapt and recover before their next lower body day. I might also do the same with the deadlift. If I might keep the same variation. Maybe not. It's going to be all dependent upon the person's goals. If the person wants to get good at back squatting and conventional deadlifting, then I'm going to program them on both days because that's their goal. They want to get good at those two exercises. But if somebody just says, hey, I'm coming to you because I want to get strong and I want to feel good, then I might add a little bit more variation to the foundational movement patterns early on.
And then, so when you're doing the other lifts after these bigger compound lifts, like you're doing split squats, you're doing some hip thrusts, and I'm sure other variations of lower body exercises. Are you programming those in like a higher rep range?
Yeah, I do. Because I think people need to be exposed to all sorts of rep ranges. I just don't think early on when learning these big bilateral lifts that we should keep the reps too high. I like to 3 sets of 5 or 6 on the squat, and then we follow it up with maybe 3 sets of 8 per side with a rear foot elevated split squat. And then maybe if somebody comes to me and they're really feeling frisky and they need to have that, they need that little bit of bodybuilding, I might do 3 sets of 15 of leg extensions at the end. Just to
Nice.
you got to meet people, right? You got to meet people halfway.
Yeah, you got to get the pump. What do the upper body days look like?
So upper body days, yeah, if it's a 4-day split, usually day 1 is going to start with some sort of horizontal barbell variation, barbell bench press, low incline bench press, incline bench press, or even dumbbell, some sort of horizontal pressing variation on one day. And then the other day is going to start with some sort of vertical pressing variation, provided that they have the mobility to do it, right? We're not going to overhead press people if you only have 140 degrees of shoulder flexion. I'll landmine press somebody that has 140 degrees of shoulder flexion, but I'm not going to overhead press them. So we start with the horizontal or vertical movement pattern that works best for that individual. Same rep range. If it's barbell, I'm going to keep it in 4 to 8. If it's dumbbell, I'll keep it a little bit higher, just because of the stabilizing effect that people need to take into account. They might not get a stimulus with 4 reps on dumbbell right in the beginning.
Because it's just like there's not enough, there's too much freedom of motion to be able to load it heavy enough because of the control aspect.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, it's my bias. I always like to say when I'm a bias versus this is the truth. It's my bias not to program dumbbell pressing work in the lower rep ranges, specifically early on. But yeah, so we start with the basic movement pattern, either horizontal press, vertical press, and then you always want to get it. We look at it as movement patterns. So if I really had to organize it, day 1 upper might be horizontal press, horizontal pull, and then maybe a retraction specific isolation work, like a rear delt fly, like a band pull apart, and then maybe a bicep tricep superset, some curls for the girls. Maybe that's day 1.
When you're doing the like the reverse flies and the retraction work, I've been stuck in my little apartment with these tiny weights doing a bunch of like reverse flies. How much, like when you're doing those, I've been thinking a lot about it, is what I'm trying to say. When you're doing those, how much glenohumeral joint motion are you focused on versus the actual scapula? Like how much are you thinking about the position of the actual bones when you're doing these movements?
Gotcha. I think we need to specify me because I'm kinesthetically aware, or
yes.
Yeah. So for
Well,
me,
can I interrupt you? I would love to know what you personally think,
okay,
knowing what you know and your experience, and then what you want other people who may not have like the
gotcha.
image in their mind of what the bone looks like and how the joints move to be able to position it that way.
Gotcha. Me personally, I focus on retraction and I don't let my glenohumeral joint tip forward too much at end range, simply because I had a shoulder surgery in 2011 and it doesn't feel that great for me. If I try, for example, if I try and do a rear delt fly while not retracting, but focusing on posterior delt, which would inevitably tip my shoulder forward, it doesn't feel that great for me.
Where does it not feel great? In the
Right
front
in
or
the
in the
interior,
back?
right in the front, like right where the
Ah,
long head of the biceps is. I had the long head of the biceps repaired uh, in 2011, like reattached. It was a type 2 slap repair. And I
oh.
have yet to 100% get over that sensitivity in the front.
How
So
did
I
that
need to position. What's up?
how did that if you don't mind sharing, what do you did oh you were a pitcher?
Baseball pitcher. Yeah.
Ah.
I had a 10-2 slap tear. They put 9 bioabsorbable anchors in there in 2011, like 3 in the front
Wow.
of the labrum, 3 in the top, and 3 in the back.
What was
So
that? I'm curious. What did it feel like before you got it repaired? That like, what did your shoulder feel like when you would lift and move it around?
terrible. Yeah, I mean, as much as I can remember. It's so funny how, as a natural protective mechanism, humans like tend to forget pain. I mean, we see this with, I mean, I've never experienced childbirth, but I've heard that it's like almost after somebody has a child, you almost the body like purposely forgets what intense pain feels like as a protective mechanism. So it's almost hard for me to think back to 2011 to remember what that felt like. But I know it wasn't fun. I know I only had like 90 degrees of pain-free shoulder flexion. Like I could
Wow.
not go above 90. It just hurt. But somehow with enough ibuprofen and enough just warming up, it went away. I would get this little window where I could pitch for 2 hours, and then it would just come back with like terribly. Yeah, it was. Yeah, the slap repair was rough. I remember the surgeon telling me that as soon as I went under anesthesia, it just dislocated. It just fell right out.
Oh my gosh. Is that not a testament to the importance of muscle tone around our
Yeah,
joints?
yeah. So I was walking around. It was the muscle tone and the awareness that was keeping it from dislocating. As soon as anesthesia, he's like, it fell right out. I'm like, whoa.
Wow. That is crazy. So what was the recovery process like?
Not fun. And I think that that's what made me grow to how I am today. I did so many things wrong. I did so many things wrong with that. I wasn't able to do a pain-free push-up for 8 months. And for those that are,
There's your 8 months again, huh?
yeah, it keeps like this running theme. For those of you out there that either have had a slap repair and you're listening to this, or maybe you have one scheduled, do not like use my example as being the norm, because I pushed things way too soon. I went against the PT's advice. I went in like week 1 and tried to do like reverse flies and all kind of.
Week 1,
Yeah. I mean,
dude.
I was 18.
Okay, fair enough.
I was like,
Wow, 18 was rough. You had that back injury and you had a
yeah,
labral repair.
yeah,
Whew.
yeah. I competed in a powerlifting competition 2 weeks before that labral repair. Squat and deadlift only, not bench.
Because you couldn't.
Yeah. And it just, I couldn't bench. It didn't hurt. I mean, it hurt too much and it was 2 weeks. So it wouldn't have even, I remember the surgeon seeing that picture in the newspaper. And he's like, did you just do this? I was like, no, it was 2 weeks before, because my picture was in the newspaper for some, I can't really remember that, but
Man with 18-year-old with labral tear
yeah. He's
pulls massive weight at local competition.
yeah. So mistakes I made, I went too hard, too quick. Surgeries, like, take it easy in the beginning. And I should have just taken it easy. And that was the first mistake I made. I tried to get back into my habits too quickly. Second mistake I made was thinking it was okay to continually push through pain, because no pain, no gain, right? There's a much different approach to rehabbing nowadays. It's come a long way from 50 years ago, where people would have a total knee replacement and you would put a towel in their mouth and just see how far you can bend their knee until they screamed, right? That's no longer a thing. So I wouldn't have pushed through too much pain. I think that kept me sensitized for too long, and that's why I had such a long recovery. I would have been more conservative in the beginning, and I would have loaded more appropriately and tolerably in the middle stages.
Gotcha. Wow, I did not know this about you. So then when you're doing something like to get back to the reverse flies and the scapular position.
Sorry.
So if you're doing So if you're doing a reverse fly and you get into like maybe the end of your ability to retract and externally rotate your scapula, then you'll end up going into too much shoulder horizontal abduction and start to push against the biceps tendon. Is that what you think is?
For me, yeah, I think that's what's going on. If I'm programming so that's why I tend to avoid it. If I'm programming for somebody, I don't think that motion is necessarily evil. If somebody, I don't think it's going to cause injury if you allow somebody to go into excessive horizontal abduction. It might cause injury if you load too much, too quickly, at too high of a volume.
Hard to do with it. If you're doing a reverse fly in a particular way, it's pretty hard to go heavy enough where you'd think there could be like tissue damage.
So I just coach it. Yeah. So I just coach it. I say, can you feel this squeezing in between your shoulder blades? Yeah. And then I move on. I try not to overcomplicate things.
Okay. Yeah. It's funny. Like when I do reverse flies, if I get too much horizontal abduction, when I do it instead of the scapular retraction, I get pinching in the back.
Oh, interesting.
I have to be very, I realize that it's so funny, right? Like you just don't know what people are doing outside the gym and what they don't even realize that they're doing.
Yeah.
Like if I sit for a lot of hours on the computer, I end up like putting my left shoulder in the worst position and then like lean into it. And then like that. So then if I do a reverse fly and I don't like very particularly think about my scapular position, it's just like continually jamming it in the same way. It's like, well, people always make fun of like the meme on the internet of when you go to your doctor and they say, don't do that. Sometimes you need to not do that.
Yeah, that's actually, I used that meme in my fitness webinar a couple days ago, that exact meme. Well, I mean, it's obviously a meme, so it's supposed to be funny, but I gave myself an achy triceps tendon once because I just sat with my elbow on like a hard desk in the same position for too long. And then I wondered why my elbow was aching when I was lifting. It was because I wasn't tolerating it being on a hard surface for 7 hours straight.
Surprise. Yeah. See, your problem is that you're dosing it wrong. You need to slowly build up your elbow compression, an RPE of 5, and then you could eventually build it up, and then you could sit all day like that.
Maybe, but I had to definitely modify it to finally get over it. But yeah, maybe I just didn't do it right. I didn't dose it right.
I used to read this textbook sitting at this like bar height counter, and then I was running, and I was like, man, my knee hurts. And I'm like, what am I doing with my cadence, or what am I doing with whatever? And I realized that every morning when I was sitting there reading for an hour, I was jamming my knee into the like wall that was underneath the counter.
Mm-hmm.
And so I stopped doing that, and then it went away. And right. So my point is like, you just, when you're working with people, right, you don't know what kind of weird stuff they're doing that you don't even know about, that it's like, hey, it's actually not the volume and it's not the movement. They're jamming their elbow into a freaking table 7 hours a day.
Yeah.
You have to uncover those things.
You do. And I think what's key is the fact that you said 7 hours a day. I mean, we're robust humans, so there's nothing wrong with slouching for a little bit. There's nothing wrong with resting your elbow on a table for a little bit or pushing your knee into a table. But if you do it for 7 hours straight, now we're running into an issue, right? That can create, I mean, if we could go down the whole posture train too, if you wanted, like slouching for 8 hours a day probably isn't good, but sitting up super straight with your back arched, keeping your lumbar extensors maximally contracted for 8 hours is probably not the answer either, right? It's the duration.
It's somewhere in the middle.
Yeah. So like when I'm sitting at my desk, I like to shift sometimes, throw one foot up over the knee, just change it up a little bit.
Yeah. Can I tell you one of those dumb things I did to myself?
Mm-hmm.
In chiro school, I used these 3-ring binders to do all my notes and stuff in. And I would sit in lecture as a habit. I didn't realize this until later, but I would like rest the anterior aspect of my wrist like on one of the metal rings on my left hand. And then every time I would do any sort of like barbell clean, I would get like a nerve impulse in my wrist that shot into my fingers. And I was like, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, I gave myself some form of like neuropathy by compressing it, like a neuropraxic injury
Yeah.
by compressing it like 30 hours a week on a piece of metal. How silly is that?
Yep, that's wild. I mean, I had something, it wasn't a binder, but I used to, when I like to road bike, and I recently had to change my grip on the handlebars because I was doing something similar. I had the way I was resting my hand, I'd wake up the next day and my pinky and my ring finger and even the lateral aspect of my palm would be numb. And it was just like, I must be compressing somewhere I shouldn't be. So I had to just alter my hand grip just a teeny bit, and it was fine after.
Knowing that kind of information, and this is why I think it's so important for people to understand certain things about the body to be able to manage those little issues themselves. Like you said it earlier, you're going to have tweaks and problems up and down with your body throughout your life, right? Like keeping your body, your physical body healthy for your entire life, it's hard. There's times when it really sucks. There's really bad days, there's really bad months, there's really bad years, like your 18th year, right? But like
Yeah.
educating yourself about the body and knowing how load and positions and things like that affect you, it allows you to like sort of be empowered to make choices that help you to get a lot of these things better and to make smarter choices, right? I'm curious, as a segue from that statement into the next question, what do you think is important for trainers and clinicians who work with people who do barbell lifts? Because I know that over the last year before the global shutdown, you had been teaching a lot of workshops all over the country, and some you taught some in other countries too, didn't you?
No, I had them planned. I wasn't able to move forward with them because of COVID.
That's right. But you taught a bunch throughout the United States, and I'm sure throughout that process, you saw some recurring themes of, I think that a lot of coaches, trainers, clinicians should really understand this and this, and there's some common misconceptions.
Yeah.
I know that's a sort of unprepared question that I just came up with. I'm curious though, do any of those things come to mind?
Yeah. And I think it's stuff we still take for granted because I'm under, like, to me, I'm always varying squat stance, and squat stance is the big thing. I'm always varying squat stance with people, but I forget that there's still the idea out there that people need to squat with their toes forward. So that occurs every workshop where, well, what do you think about what insert name here has to say about having to squat with their toes forward? And that's where I go on my, everybody's different, hip retroversion, hip anteversion. And I'm sure we will talk about that in our webinar coming up.
Yes.
I think we'll hit pretty hard on that. So squat stance is one where there is still the idea out there that everybody needs to squat with their toes forward. And I think that needs to die.
What do you think it needs to, what do you think it would take? What understanding do you think needs to be there for that to die? Like, what are people missing in their understanding of the structure or whatever that isn't connecting?
I don't think that people are missing anything. I think that the fact is that there are still educators out there teaching toes forward variations. So it's like this battle, like people like us who are going out there and saying, look, hey, you can squat with narrow, wide, toes out, toes in based on your anatomy. But for every one of us that are out there, I think there's unfortunately still people out there that are saying no, like toes forward.
So why should it not be toes forward in your opinion?
Well, yeah, because everybody has different hip anatomy. And I mean, when it really comes down to it, Some people are retroverted, some people are anteverted. Hips or toes forward isn't bad. Some people will squat with their toes forward. Those with more anteverted hips will feel better in that position. But if you have significantly retroverted hips and you try and squat with your toes forward, and I just talked about this on my Fit Pro webinar last week. If you have retroverted hips and you try and squat with your toes forward, you will probably get a pinch in the front of your hips at the bottom of a squat. That doesn't mean anything's wrong with you. And that doesn't mean you need medical care. And personal trainers need to know that. Personal trainers need to know that if somebody has a hip pinch at the bottom of the squat, it doesn't necessarily mean something's wrong with their client. It doesn't mean you need to refer them out immediately. It means you need to do some investigating.
Because you're pinching because they're pinching their hip because of the structure of their hip.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like that's what pinching feels. Pinching feels like pinching.
Yeah.
And if like the 3-dimensional geometry of certain people's hips requires that their toes are at different positions so that they are less geometrically positioned to pinch.
Yeah.
Right.
And it doesn't mean that it's something that's wrong with them. Like it's a pet peeve. There's this one picture, and I actually use it in the web. I use it in my course, and I cross out because it says normal hip, retroverted hip, anteverted hip. And I like crossing out. Yeah, I like crossing out retroverted and crossing out anteverted and writing normal in red because these are all normal variations. Doesn't mean it's wrong. There's something wrong with you if you're retroverted. It means that you need to squat. You might squat differently than your buddy next to you, and that's okay.
Yeah. It's so important. So many pinchy hips can be not pinchy if we just stop pinching them by orienting the hip socket in a different way, which looks like the toes pointed out, right?
Yeah, and that's totally within the scope of a personal trainer, right? If you have somebody do a toes forward body weight squat and it hurts their hips, you don't need to refer out immediately, right? You need to do some investigating first. Here's where I always draw the line, because I get this question a lot in my seminars, because it's usually a 50-50 turnout, 50% strength coach, personal trainer, 50% DPT chiro. And people are like, where do you draw the line? And I'll tell you exactly where I draw the line. If, as a personal trainer, there's no red flags, personal trainers should at least be aware of red flags. Like if somebody comes into you and they say, like, I lost control of bowel and bladder, that's not something a modification can fix. So if there's no red flags, and all it takes is a simple form adjustment or a simple programming adjustment to completely eradicate pain, that is 100% within your scope as a personal trainer to do.
It means you're doing a better job training them.
Yeah, you're not doing manual therapy. You're not illegally doing manual therapy on your clients. You're just adjusting the dosage and adjusting the form.
Yeah. We want to think everybody's the same because it makes it easy, right?
Because then you don't have to think. But the second you stop thinking, the second you draw conclusions about things, the second that you stop growing as a person.
Yeah. And it can be useful sometimes also to like for those people who might be listening and thinking like, well, I don't know if I agree with that. Just ask the question of, have you ever been wrong before in your life about anything? And is it possible that your conclusion is not correct now? And then if so, don't you want to be trying to always move towards being more correct in the way that you do things? And like the human body is just like the skeleton is just, it's levers and hinges oriented and at a certain length.
Yeah.
Like if it wasn't a human and it was a metal skeleton and the joints were oriented differently, you would not expect it to move the same. But with humans, we think that there's some like magical reflexive motor control pattern that's going to make them suddenly be able to do this particular lift in this particular way.
Mm-hmm. And add on top of that the fact that humans are basically extremely conscious beings that bring in thought, emotion, past history. that's gonna make somebody's movement. That's gonna influence somebody's movement as well. For example, like what I told you, I tweaked my back on the deadlift when I was
Yeah.
18. That was a conventional deadlift. To this day, I am not afraid to admit that I have a fear avoidance of a conventional deadlift. So I just don't do it. I sumo deadlift because the second I start to get heavy on the conventional deadlift, my brain remembers what happens when I was 18, and I start to get like antsy and anxious about it. So I don't do it.
And you're still an okay human being, even though you don't do that.
Yeah, I do cheating deadlifts or sumo deadlifts, right?
Yeah, you're a cheater, man. You're a cheater. Uh, yeah, like our conscious awareness can really mess things up, right? Like, other animals who can't be like, I saw on the internet that there was a post about needing to do X and Y and Z in my lift. Then you become way too aware of what you're doing. And I think a lot of times people take, this is a recurring theme of this episode. They think, like, I need to position myself in a certain way. So then they take that to the max of what that is. So it's like, if I need to not round my back in a deadlift, I need to really arch.
Yeah.
Or if I need to have tension in my upper back when I'm doing, this lift, I better go to the very end.
Yeah.
Right.
Or like people will try and maintain a hard retraction during a deadlift, which just doesn't work. Yeah. But people take everything to the extreme because it's tough to realize that if we come full circle here, that health, wellness, and strength is a lifelong journey, right?
Yes.
But everybody wants to see what kind of gains can I make on the next 4-week block? What kind of PRs can I set on the next 4 week of programming? Rather than thinking, okay, I'm 30, 40 now. How can I train now that is both enjoyable and will also lead to longevity?
Right. And it's like, why do we want to do that? Right. Because it's good for our long-term health, and the healthier that each individual person is, the healthier the human race is. And if you have pain and injuries because of programming, when your goals are to be healthy and pain-free, and you're not achieving those goals because your programming and the way that you're thinking about it is off, now you have injuries. Now that you're probably affecting the people around you because you're not in as good of a mood because your body hurts. Like, how does that continue to trickle and seep out,
This
right?
cascade effect, right?
Keeping our bodies. Go ahead.
Yeah. So like now you're always cranky, that you're this cranky person. Nobody wants you around. Like, yeah, it can just skyrocket.
Right.
But yeah, it's important. And I don't want people to think that you should only be training to like you should be training in your 20s to make sure that you can stand up out of a chair when you're 80, right? There needs to be a balance of, my training is longevity proof, but it also does bring me joy currently, right?
It's one of the things. There are like a certain number of things that we can do that are enjoyable and really healthy for us to be doing, and training and being physical is one of those. Like, you feel better when you train hard. Just train hard in a way that's not going to mess you up.
Yeah.
Right. Isn't that's the idea?
Yeah. Don't test your 1 rep max after 3 months of COVID quarantine, right? Just stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, gosh, this has been awesome. I've really enjoyed chatting with you and seeing how you think about these things. Can you tell the people listening a little bit about your online workshop that is available, kind of what you teach, and then hopefully, people can attend in person when that's allowed. But yeah, so what do you teach in your online workshop that you have available?
Yeah, in our online workshop, I basically teach fitness and rehab professionals how to coach and modify these big basic lifts: the squat, bench, deadlift, and overhead press. So basically, each one of those lifts I just named is a specific module of the course, and I will go through and teach how to coach those lifts. But then I'll also show you what modifications to use for people that have different types of issues. Like, how should you optimally coach the squat when somebody comes in with acute knee pain? How can you continue to promote squatting while somebody has knee pain? How do you teach somebody how to deadlift when they have extension-based back pain? How do you teach somebody how to deadlift when they have flexion-based back pain? So like all of these different things that can both arm fitness professionals so that, like, let's be honest, I always talk about like the unicorn client where everybody's going to have some sort of little ache or pain, and the fitness professional needs to know how to train around that. On the other aspect, we need to arm rehab professionals with this too, because rehab professionals are going to get people that want to work out. So they need to know this stuff of how can I continue to allow this person to train tolerably without completely having them just quit and take a break. So we go through all 4 of those lifts for personal trainers, strength coaches, online course, CU approved. Oh boy, by now CU approved NSCA, ACE, NASM, ISSA. So we got CU approval because we truly believe in this, and I'm hoping to teach it live again, either late this year or into next year.
Yeah, who knows when that'll open up, huh?
We'll see. We got to keep rolling with the punches. That's all we can do.
Yeah. I think learning modifications of exercises and having a variety of variations that you can use with people and understand the implications of each one and how it affects the different things, like that to me is a skill that should be continually honed, because it's so powerful. Like having the little tweaks of lifts and the different, understanding the different angles and how that loads different things is such a great skill to have. So I'm glad to hear you have included that as a big piece in the workshop.
Thanks. Yep. And it's just always it's so amazing how such a little tweak can make such a big difference. Like, right. Yeah. Isn't it wild that like supinating your hand just 20 degrees can completely relieve shoulder pain on, like, by doing a dumbbell bench press instead of a barbell bench press? It's wild.
The slight subtle angle changes are so powerful.
Yeah.
It is almost unbelievable sometimes. Well, I'm looking forward to the webinar that we're doing, which will be about a week and a half after this show goes live. So for those of you listening, if you want to learn more, we are preparing a webinar. You can find a link to that at themovementfix.com/webinars. You can sign up there. It's free to sign up. And we will be diving a lot more into hips, retroversion, antiversion, modifications. Great opportunity to continue learning about stuff on this topic. Dr. Mash, where should people follow you? Where are you most active for those who would like to continue learning from you?
Gotcha. I would say we're working on building up our YouTube channel with new informative videos. So I would either go to youtube.com/Barbell Rehab, or follow me if you want to see a little bit more into my personal life and all my cats. You can check me out on Instagram stories at Barbell Rehab.
How many cats do you have?
3. They're all sleeping right here too, right now.
I didn't know you had 3 cats.
Yeah, sometimes they'll walk right across the screen. Yep.
Nice. Cool. Well, hey, I really appreciate your time. I appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your experiences and expertise with me and the listeners. Thank you so much, man.
Thanks for having me on.